Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, 7 Tips to Create a Motivating Work Environment. I'm Ronnie Musselwhite, Director of Content and Education for the National Golf Course Owners Association. And on behalf of the entire NGCOA, thank you for your participation. Today's event will last approximately 45 minutes and is being recorded. We will provide access to this recording and all presentation slides soon after the webinar. We will also post this webinar on our NGCOA members-only networking site, Accelerate. You know, it's no secret that motivation is the key to an empowered, self-directed, and productive work environment. But given the different personalities and preferences that are inherent in any work setting, how can you effectively inspire your employees to excel? That's one of the questions we'll seek to answer today as we explore ways to create a work environment that helps the company meet its goals while also making employees feel satisfied and fulfilled. As you may recall, this is the third in a series of 4 hospitality-oriented webinars we've been hosting over the past few weeks that focus on creating an environment that's customer-centric and wholly committed to delivering the best guest experience possible. Now I'd like to introduce Whitney Reed Pinnell, who will present today's webinar. Whitney is owner and president of the award-winning consulting firm RCS Hospitality Group. With more than 30 years of experience in the industry, she is recognized as an expert in club management with a sharp focus on operations. Prior to founding RCS, Whitney held several top management positions with companies such as Marriott Management Services, the Desert Mountain Club, and Troon Golf. Since founding RCS in 2000, Whitney and her team have worked with hundreds of clubs of various types and sizes, assisting them with everything from budget and service troubleshooting, new club openings and remodels, to the rollout of strategic plans and the development of training programs for lasting improvement. We're certainly excited to have Whitney today with us and look forward to the insights she has to share. Now, if during today's session you have a question, please type it into the message box located at the bottom left-hand side of your screen. To submit your message, simply press Enter. Whitney will field the questions and answer them as time permits. And with that, I'll turn things over to Whitney. Whitney?
Thank you, Ronnie. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. As Ronnie said, we're going to talk about motivation, and what I'd like to do is I want to just go through what motivation is, how you can determine where your team is in terms of motivation, and then I have some tips for you, 7 tips to create a motivating work environment. So as Ronnie already said, motivation is the key to an empowered, self-directed, and productive work environment. When we're in the service industry or hospitality specifically, I think it's really important that your employees are able to take care of the customer at the point of service. If they have to go through a lot of red tape or get a lot of approvals, it makes it very frustrating for our customers. So having this motivating work environment, I think, is really important. And if your employees are motivated, they will feel personally satisfied, which will boost their performance and allow them to achieve their own personal growth goals. And this, in turn, keeps them motivated. So once you have a motivated work environment with motivated employees, it becomes much easier for the company to meet its goals. So before I get to the next slide, I want you just to think about your team for a minute. I'm going to list a few ways that you can recognize if you have a motivating work environment right now. So if you have a motivated work environment, you will likely see some of these things. Cooperation should be evident among your team. There should be respect of peers, management, and customers. You should see a clear team spirit amongst your team, hopefully low absenteeism. Employees should value customers rather than considering them a nuisance. Deadlines should be easily met, and your people should be having fun. So hopefully, when you heard those things, you're feeling like you have a motivated work environment. If you don't, this program will give you some insight on how to get there. So let me just get right to this. Okay, so I have good news and bad news about motivation. You know, a lot of times I hear people say, I'm a really motivating manager, able to motivate people. And really, the reality is Everyone is motivated by something, but the bad news is that you personally can't motivate them. The best you can do is influence what they're motivated to do. All of us have motivations that come from the inside. These are intrinsic motivators, and I'll go through those in just a minute. But our motivation is affected by these external factors, which as managers, we influence. These are the extrinsic factors. So as a manager or owner, what's important for you to know is that it is impossible for you not to influence motivation, good or bad. So you're directly responsible for the environment that you create. I say that's good news, bad news, because it's something to be very aware of. So first, let's just understand these motivations. What you're looking at here is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. This is Abraham Maslow. He was a psychologist that originally printed this theory, oh my gosh, back in the early 40s, I believe. And it was part of a Psychological Review magazine, and the paper was titled The Theory of Human Motivation. This has been used in business ever since. If you studied motivation or marketing or employee management, anything in school, you've likely seen this. But this is a motivation theory which suggests that there are 5 interdependent levels of human needs, or motivators. And these must be satisfied in a strict sequence, starting with the lowest level, the physiological, and then leading up to the highest, which is self-actualization. So if you look at this, starting from the bottom of the pyramid, people are very motivated when they need a job, when they just need to put food on the table, have clothing, have shelter. They'll just take any job that's out there, and they're real motivated just by getting the job. Once they get into the job, then the next thing they'll be looking for is safety and security. Are they working in a safe environment? Is their job secure? Is this a job that they will have for the long period? So you might see your employee motivation shifting as they work their way up through this pyramid. The next thing would be a sense of belonging. Now, the original theory says love, but in the workforce, it means belonging to a group where you feel like you're part of something bigger than yourself, basically. So having this sense of belonging, you might see people wanting to socialize a little bit more. They might want to become part of a group. They might want to do things more in a group. But this sense of I matter in the bigger scheme of things. Then the next step is esteem, and that means basically that once they are doing their job, they're doing what's been asked of them, that there's some sort of recognition for that. So in the workplace, I would say it is directly correlated to rewards and recognition. And then the last step here is self-actualization. If you are someone who's been in the business a long time, or maybe in your position for a long time, or even your long-term employees, they may be at this stage where what is the meaning? What is it all about? And so they might be motivated by things that would bring them more satisfaction to kind of the meaning of their job. The trick is, as a manager, you really have to be aware of each employee and where they are in this pyramid, because it can change at any time. And I'll give you a quick example. So say you have an employee who's maybe reached the esteem level within motivation, and they're doing a great job and they just want the rewards and recognition. Then they find out that they're having a baby. They might immediately cycle back through to safety and security, and that now becomes their biggest motivator, because they want to be sure that their job is secure, for this new baby that's coming on. So they might have more questions about insurance or pay raises, things like that. So recognizing where your employees are in this theory, I think, is important as you move through creating a motivating work environment. Now, some of the things, now that you understand a little bit about these motivations, there are some things that will get in the way of motivation. And I've listed here just a few common things that I see happen quite a bit. So I want to show you this before we get into the how-tos of creating a motivating work environment. So the first thing is some sort of management by fear or intimidation or organizational fear that, I could lose my job at any time. That's definitely going to get in the way of motivation. Any sort of red tape or layers of bureaucracy within the organization, that certainly will be a demotivator. Then deadline pressures or anxiety, somebody inflicting some anxiety on the workplace, having conflicting goals or messages, and this can come sometimes from different managers. So I see it very often with one manager telling a group of employees to do something a certain way, and then another manager, maybe at a higher level or a different position, will come in and change it up. It could happen a lot with, say, a tournament. Somebody gets something set up and they're ready to go. The employees have worked really hard to do something, and someone will walk in and say, no, this is wrong, do it again. That's very demotivating. A lack of training, which we'll get to a little bit later. Any sort of conflicts between short-term and long-term goals, a lack of direction or unclear objectives, lack of time or resources. Last week or a couple weeks ago when we did this, I talked about not having resources to do your job. That certainly would be a demotivator. And then the last one here is not feeling valued by management. So as we go through these 7 tips, I'm going to touch on each one of these as we go. But I think it's important to understand, and without being able to see you and know your positions, I assume that you are managers, supervisors, or owners. And with that comes a responsibility to create a vision, articulate that vision, and then relentlessly drive it to its completion. And that's how you create a motivating work environment. So the first thing is having a vision. Bear with me. Employees just basically won't follow a leader who doesn't have a clear direction of the business. And you can see it, when we walk in sometimes to clubs, we can see if someone is a leader or not just based on the interaction they have with their staff and if the employees are going to them or if they're circumventing them. But employees just won't follow someone who doesn't have a clear direction, if they haven't communicated the person's role within the team and have a clear understanding of how you're going to deliver this vision. So the first thing after the vision, the next thing that has to happen is communicating expectations. And I talked about this a little earlier about putting the decisions at the point of service with the employees as much as possible. If a customer has a question, if an employee has to say, hold on, let me get my manager or let me call and get permission, that can really be frustrating for a customer and also demotivating for an employee because it makes them feel like you don't trust them to handle that situation. So over the years, I've advised people to try to create a team of entrepreneurial thinkers. And it's not as easy as you might think, because what you're asking them to do is think about the decisions they make as if they owned that business. What would they do? How would they treat a customer? And it's really important that the way they treat a customer is probably how they are being treated as an employee. And I'll touch on that a little bit more. But in order to cultivate this skill, you really have to be sure to explain the club, what your vision is, what you're there for, who your customers are, what service you're trying to deliver and why, and then clearly help your employee understand his or her role within that bigger picture. Very often, employees don't really know where they fit, and I think it's important for them to understand that this is my role, this is how I contribute, and this is how important my job is. The next one is demonstrating how the club operates and generates income. What are the values? If everybody doesn't understand what's important to you as a manager or an owner in terms of values, they may make decisions that are not in line with your vision. The next thing would be helping them to understand the competition and also what is your unique competitive advantage, because that's what you want to build on. That's what you want to always have shining through with your employees. And then encourage intelligent risk-taking. And the way that I would say you do this is each time they make a decision, you check with them, you talk about it, you ask them their thought process, and you give them coaching along the way, good or bad, but you build confidence with them. So, this is much like a sports team, or maybe if you have children, it might be the same way, but you build small confidences along the way, and eventually they feel like they can make these decisions in a reasonable and thoughtful manner. And then, as much as possible, inspire innovative thinking. And that basically means listening to their ideas so that they feel like if I have a new great idea, I see something that we can do better so that this never happens again if it's a service failure. You definitely want to encourage that innovation because, 10 minds are more effective than one, 20 are even better, but encouraging those ideas to keep flowing to you. So if these ideas are coming to you, the next thing I have here is be sure to listen. One of the biggest demotivators that I've seen in managers is not listening to employees. And sometimes you might physically be there and say that you're listening, but the behavior or the body language is saying something different. So I wanted to share some ideas for active listening. The idea here is that if your employees feel special when they're talking to you and heard when they're talking to you, you are showing them how to treat your customers based on how you're treating them. So I'm just going to quickly run through these. These are on the screen for you as well. But first of all, you have to stop talking. You can't try to finish someone's sentences along the way. Sometimes people get in a rush and they want to speed the conversation up, but you really can't listen if you're talking. It's important when someone comes to you with an idea that you put them at ease. Don't joke, don't be sarcastic, don't be wishy-washy. You know, sometimes, especially supervisors that are moving up the ranks, it's real easy to not let go of that peer relationship and continue to have some of those jokes or sarcasm. And in a situation where an employee's coming to you with an idea, I think it's really important that you leave those things off on the side. The next thing is making eye contact and removing distractions. I once had a manager, every time I would go to talk to him, he would take that as an opportunity to check his email and open his mail. This was back in the days when we got a lot of snail mail. But he, you know, it made me feel very unimportant, and it made me feel like he wasn't listening. And I finally had to say something to him because it just, I just felt uncomfortable having meetings with him because of that. The next thing is to be empathetic. Put yourself in their shoes. Where are they coming from? How are they feeling? What are they asking for? Where did this idea come from, possibly? And like I said, be patient. If it's an idea that you're in disagreement with or you don't like, this probably would be a time to contain your emotions and be aware of body language. You know, if you're a real expressive person, you have to be real careful about your body language. Because you might be expressing a roll of the eyes, or you might be shifting in your chair. Some people are very in tune to body language, and you might be communicating something in conflict to what you're physically saying. And then the next thing is, the last one is to ask questions and make sure to paraphrase to be sure that you understand what they're saying. And I would say these things would go for dealing with customers as well. I mean, if a customer comes to you and they have something, the same things would apply, but being an active listener really requires that you're paying attention to what's happening right in front of you and not listening just to respond, but listening to understand. Okay, number 3 for the 7 steps here is around values and core competencies. So once you have your vision and communications going, I mean, everything ties back to values, and sometimes they're also known as core competencies. But basically, your vision, communications, hiring practices, and systems and procedures all need to be in line with your core values. Hopefully, you're already working with a strategic plan and have these values already identified. But to keep your strategy intact and your service culture strong, you can use these core values every day. And that's really the best way to do it. So as an example, if you are hiring, and I always work with managers on hiring for values. If you have positions that don't require a specific skill set, you should be hiring for values and teach them those skills. Because if you hire someone who has values that are not in alignment with your own, with the club, with your manager, with your owner, it will be very hard to keep that person on board, and be very hard as a manager to create a motivating work environment. Because if you have people that don't share core values, you'll spend a lot of time managing relationships and not as much time managing the business as you would like to. So once you have these core values, you would then make decisions based on that. So if you're very solidly in tune with what you stand for, who you are, what you're trying to accomplish, it makes it very easy to have a roadmap for decisions. And then the last thing here, I would just encourage you, and you'll hear me say this over and over as a manager, to walk the talk. If you have core values and you're holding people accountable to those, you certainly need to model the behavior that you want. Number 4 is employee development. This is where training comes in. So when I talk about employee development, I'm talking about ongoing training. And this is something that really requires a level of commitment if you're trying to create a motivating work environment that will engage your customers. Training is an overall culture. It's not just a few weeks of focus. It's not a one-day orientation. And I would just ask you to think about these questions. And if you have a pen in front of you, you might want to jot these down. But here's how you'll know if you have a culture of training or if you're viewing it as a one-day or two-week process. So the first question is, what kind of training do you provide? The second one is, do you offer opportunities and promote them? So do you offer your own training and promote those opportunities to your employees? Do you work to keep your employees engaged? And this could be things like, recognizing birthdays possibly, or including them in decisions. But there are a lot of things that you can do as a manager to keep your employees engaged. Have you identified an appropriate investment of time, money, and resources for your employees? When we had the recession, this was one of the areas that was first cut by everyone, was investment in employees. But if you think about who spends the most time with your customers, it's the employees. So to me, I like to put a lot of time and energy into the employees because they're the ones carrying the message. They're the ones making the decisions. They're the ones listening to the customers, and they have to feel engaged and comfortable to bring customer feedback back to you as a manager, or you'll never hear it. You'll only hear it if you personally are out there talking to every customer you have. And then I would just ask you, if you don't have these training resources in place, do you know how much an untrained or unmotivated employee can cost you each year? Not just from turnover. Turnover costs about, I think, on average, I'll just say on average, about $2,500 to turn over a position. If it's a management position, they say it's upwards of 1.5 of someone's salary. So, but an untrained, unmotivated employee can cost you customers more than anything, and that costs you revenue, that costs your reputation, that costs marketing dollars. I mean, there's a lot of things that go into this if your employees are not motivated and engaged. So I would encourage you to create challenges and opportunities for growth and development, because remember that pyramid of motivation. You have to keep moving people along that motivation or they'll look elsewhere for it. So if they've reached the point of esteem and they're not getting recognition for the skills that they have, they're now looking for new skills to be learned. So you have to keep an eye on them to keep this motivation going. And when you're doing this with employee development, to help employees make these decisions, to keep them engaged, to give them these opportunities for growth and development, these are the ways that you can help them do it. First of all, have clear goals for them. What are they trying to accomplish with you? What are you trying to get accomplished with them? And then set clear goals together. Ask for their help in making decisions. I was very, very lucky years ago to have a manager groom me to take over his position as general manager. And the way that he did this, one of the ways he did this, was every day he included me on decisions. So he would present to me a situation and say, what would you do? And I would talk about it, and he would coach me through it and say, okay, well, here's the good about that. Here's something else to think about. Here's what I would do. And he helped me learn by getting me involved in making decisions. The other thing that he did was he recognized best responses when I was interacting with customers or members, any sort of feedback that was coming back, and the same thing with employees. But he would work with me on best responses, and I believe there's a lot to be said for how you present things when dealing with employees or customers. And then the last thing I would say here is not to be afraid of mistakes, because we are in the people business and mistakes are going to happen. The best thing you can do is talk about them, use them as training opportunities, and try to make sure that you're not repeating mistakes, obviously. But mistakes are going to happen, and it's something that you just have to know. You can try to anticipate it, try to keep them from happening. You can do everything in your power, but because, we're managing a group of people, serving a group of people, the mistakes will happen. But they are training opportunities, and it's something to help people learn as they go. So when you're talking about employee development, a couple of other things here. Employees generally will work smarter and harder when they understand what's in it for them. So you see my little acronym here, WIIFM, what's in it for me. So as you're developing employees, if you're talking to them about new things to do, if you help them see how it's going to benefit them, is it going to get them a promotion? Is it going to reduce the time they have to spend on something? Is it going to be more efficient? Is it going to improve teamwork? Whatever it is that might affect them directly, you'll have a better chance of them buying into the process. If you help them understand the link between meeting their own needs and doing exceptional work, that's when you really start affecting those external motivations. So here are some of the things, some of the questions that you might ask or answer, I should say, when you're talking with your employees and you're trying to get them on board. Make sure that they understand what's expected of them. Make sure they understand their role as part of the group and the club overall. Definitely want to be sure they know what is unacceptable performance. I'm working with a club right now who said, it just dawned on me that I have people working here that have never worked in a club, and he said, I just had someone changing their shirt in the parking lot, and something about being covered in tattoos. And he said, but it's something I didn't think I needed to say, but now I feel like it's something I need to say. This is the conduct and behavior that we want, and these are the unacceptable items, so that it's very, very clear to people. And then the next thing is, what do they have to do to reach performance standards? So what are the standards? And one thing I would say on here is you can't keep changing the goalpost. You can't say this is what you need to do to reach this level, and they reach it, and then you say, well, just a little bit further, just a few more yards. That will be very unmotivating to someone. So be clear about what you're looking for and what they have to do to achieve those standards. As you're going through, once you're in the employee development, once you set the standards, you train everyone, you get them where they need to be, the next thing is performance management, which means this is the ongoing training, the coaching that needs to go on to keep people motivated, because if you're not recognizing what they're doing, good or bad, they're going to start almost acting out, or they might be looking elsewhere if they feel like they're not being recognized. So performance management, in other words, holding people accountable. There's a lot of different ways to do it, but one thing when you're managing, developing employees, sometimes we forget as managers that we see potential in people that they don't yet see in themselves. So the very first thing I have here is stretch them. Much like a rubber band, you stretch it a little bit. It doesn't break, but it never goes back to the original shape that it was. It grows a little bit each time it's stretched. So as managers, as owners, supervisors, stretching employees and helping them see their potential, helping them see what you see is really important. Then I have some other items here like setting standards, which we've talked about, defining the scope of responsibility, help them with their buy-in. If you have to sit down with someone and have a conversation, a coaching or a counseling conversation, be sure that you document it, because a lot can be lost. Sitting down one-on-one, the minute we relive it in our minds or we talk about it again, if you study anything about how our brains work, basically what we're doing is we're rewriting that memory. So documenting what you agree on and deciding a course of action, I think, is real important, just to be sure that everyone is crystal clear about what you've agreed to do, what your expectations are. And then you want to be sure that you observe their behavior from that point on and follow up. If they're doing it, be sure to say, hey, you're doing a great job. Thank you for listening. I see the change in your behavior or whatever the task that you're doing. And then if you're offering rewards, be sure that you're clear about those. And if you offer rewards, be sure that you give them. And recognize if an employee is doing something on their own, if they're doing something that you've asked them to do, or they're taking it on themselves to do something, be sure that you recognize that. And you see here my other notes about walking the talk. I just can't stress it enough, because one of the biggest things about motivation is having a manager who is acting and modeling the behavior that they ask. So as part of this performance management, I said that we often see people's potential before they do. And one of the things I think as a manager, and this is something that is not easy to do because we have a tendency to look for the negative as managers. We look for things to fix. And because of that, we have a tendency to look for things that are going wrong instead of looking for the things that are going right or expecting the best. So you see here I have a note about the Pygmalion effect. And if you don't know what that is, I'll let you go look it up, but I'll give you the gist. It's basically whatever you expect of someone and communicate and let them know is likely what you're going to get. So if you're expecting the worst of someone, it's going to come out in how you interact with them. It's going to come out in the words and phrases or body language that you use with them. And chances are you're going to get it. But if you are looking for the best, you're expecting the best, you're communicating that's what you're expecting, people have a natural human tendency to rise to that level as long as they believe in themselves. And that's part of you as a manager, helping them to believe. And then the last part of performance management is to remember to say thank you often. And when you do, you not just thank you for being here, but be specific, be sincere, personalize it. Like, hey, thank you for coming in on a Sunday when you weren't originally scheduled. I really appreciate it. You really helped the team out, something like that. And be sure that you're saying thank you in a timely manner. One thing I would encourage you is to stay away from the big but, and it's not that but. It's, giving praise and then saying, but you should have done X, Y, and Z, or I expect the best of you, but you're not showing me that it's happening. Anytime you put that on there, you've basically just erased everything you just said in front of it. So if you have something like that to say, try to separate it out into different conversations, definitely different sentences, but don't say, hey, thanks for coming in Sunday. It was really great. You were so helpful to us. But, you've really done, you really haven't shown me that you are committed to the team. You've just taken away your thank you. So be careful with that big but. Maybe you'll remember that just for the name. Okay, so number 6 here is using teamwork and synergy. Basically, if you have a team, if you have a solid team, what you will see, they'll develop potential in each other. Every time they have success, it makes them crave more success. Teams will often create their own benchmarks and strive to improve. So if you have a well-oiled machine, you might see your team say, hey, we staged carts for this tournament last month in X amount of time. This month, let's do it, let's shave off 20 minutes to make a game out of it or something. But they might constantly strive to beat their own performance. Teams often encourage ideas, and they know to use synergy to get results, which synergy basically means that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. They'll also think about the big picture. Teams make the bad times more tolerable. And I would add on here that they forgive each other, believe in one another, appreciate each other, and they desire to act responsibly for the benefit of the team. If you have people on your team making decisions that directly hurt your team, that person is not feeling like they're in a motivated work environment. So I would just encourage you to take a look at that. So one of the ways that you will recognize your team, if they inconvenience themselves to help each other, if they're patient and concerned for each other, if they're working together, if they are celebrating success together or each other's success without any sort of jealousy, they probably are a very solid team. One thing I do want to share with you are some very quick ways to lose your team. This happens quite a bit, and I see managers sometimes struggle with this. Something happens, then the team all of a sudden is not following their leader, and you can get out of it by having a very open, frank conversation. But what I just want to share with you, these are the things that will immediately go against having a motivated work environment. Saying that you will empower them, but then you don't do it, or instill fear and anxiety, being manipulative, making promises and then not delivering on those. Informing the public about something before telling the employees. If you put out a promotion for a special or something and a customer shows up for this special and your employees don't know about it, if that's a repeated behavior, it's definitely going to cause your team not to trust you. Failing to communicate expectations, giving rewards that have little or no meaning. It's better to give no reward than give something that doesn't have any meaning behind it. Being inaccessible to your team, giving the impression that you're only concerned with yourself, and I would throw into that taking credit for other people's ideas or work also. Then delegating responsibility, but not true authority. Telling someone that they're responsible for doing it, but then when they try to do something, then you take a step back and say, well, you shouldn't have done that. Or any sort of wishy-washy behavior. As a leader, I think it's better just make a decision. Just make a decision with the information that you have. If it's a wrong decision, learn from it, make it right. But don't go back and forth in front of your team because they're looking to you to lead them. Disorganization or procrastination and tolerating poor performance. I do just want to touch on this. If you feel like your team has slipped below your standard expectation, I think one of the things that can happen is you may have a manager somehow, or maybe you yourself contributed to this and didn't realize it. But anytime you tolerate poor performance, what you're really doing is you are non-verbally communicating a new standard to the team. So if you have high performers working next to mediocre team members, and no pressure is ever put on the mediocre team members to raise their game, I should say. If nothing is ever done with those poor performers, the high performers will either drop down to that low performing state, or they will look to go somewhere else where they can be high performers and working with people just like them. So that's one way that you can quickly lose members of your team is tolerating that poor performance. And the other thing I would say is focusing on only the negatives. I had a manager one time, he would put 10 pennies in his pocket, and this doesn't always work for women because we don't always have pockets, but he would put 10 pennies in one pocket, and his goal was at the end of every day, those pennies would be moved to the other side, to the other pocket. And what he would do is every time he would thank someone or notice something going right or catch people doing something right, he would move a penny to the other side. But this was his way of reminding himself to not only focus on the negatives, to be sure to recognize all the great things that are going on as well. The number 7 item on this motivation is actually, it's 3 that I combined into one, but it's having hope, trusting each other, and having fun. So with these 3 things, this is where you get the energy from your employees. This is where you get increased self-esteem. They're more enthusiastic about their work. They have, more energy coming across to your customers, to each other. They have a real sense of team spirit. This is also how you have a sustaining work environment or motivating work environment from one day to the next, or week to week, or month to month. It's also when you start to see positive attitudes. If people don't have this hope, trust, and fun, some of the things that you might see are just real negativity about what's going on. You won't see a sense of urgency in what they do. You might not see a sense of urgency in how they walk or how they talk. They might mumble a little bit because they just don't have a lot of energy. So if you've ever been somewhere where everyone was real enthusiastic and showing a lot of positive energy, that's really contagious. And for those of you that have joined these webinars looking for ways to gain a competitive edge, certainly getting your employees involved in a motivating work environment, if they have this energy and this enthusiasm, they make people feel special just by being around them. So they get real excited about what they're doing, and that really is contagious. You think about the people that you gravitate towards, chances are they have a lot of energy, they're enthusiastic about what they do, they have some sort of passion that comes through, and this all comes from this hope, trust, and fun. The hope that, even if it's a bad day today, tomorrow's going to be another chance to have a good day. But trusting that if you make a mistake, someone is there to get your back. And then obviously having fun. I think I said it in one of my other webinars, but I'll share it with you today. Even though we're in the leisure business, the idea is that people only feel the leisure side of it and not the business side of it. And that comes from employees having fun. And I mean, they should be enjoying their work and having fun with the customers, not crossing the line into anything unprofessional, but continuing to have fun. So a couple of things I just want to touch on with those three is building trust. As a manager, as a leader, as an owner, it's real important that your team they trust you. They trust you, they trust each other, and this is really critical for having a motivating work environment. If people don't trust each other, they don't share ideas with each other, they don't help one another, they often talk behind each other's backs, and they will sit there and watch someone drop the ball. And that's certainly not what we want. So for building trust, I mean, obviously it's rooted in respect, having communications at the right time, using the right tone and the right location. I mean, you certainly don't want to dress someone down in front of everyone. That is not communicating respect for a team member. So if you have something that you need to talk with someone about that's serious, and it's about their performance only, certainly you want to do that in a location away from the rest of the team. I have here to be short on promises and long on fulfillment. It kind of goes along with, under promise, over deliver. But it goes along those same lines. The other thing is being transparent and open. Let them know what's going on and be honest with what's going on. Now, the one thing I would caution you, if you are being open and honest with employees that this might be their first job or maybe within their first few jobs, you might need to be real careful about how you share that information, possibly even give them scripts. You know, if you're giving them information, you want to be aware that they're going to repeat verbatim what you say. So say it in the way that you hope they will repeat it if that's your if that's your workforce who you're talking to. Listening and not arguing, avoid zingers, digs, put downs, and sarcasm. I mean, you can quickly lose someone's trust by laughing at them, not with them, but at them. Be sure to focus on the positive, appreciate what they have to say, any ideas that they bring to you, whether it's a good or a bad idea. At least encourage the ideas to continue to come. Trust is a mutual exchange, so they have to also earn your trust just as much. And then, hopefully the trust gradually increases as you continue to work together. And then the last couple here, especially as a manager, sometimes new managers, it's a hard path to navigate, but it's okay to be human and to show that you're human, and laugh at yourself as well. But be truthful. And if you don't believe it, if you don't believe what you're saying, it's not going to come across as being truthful. So if you believe it, you should be truthful with your group, with your team, and it should definitely come through with what you say. Okay, the last couple of things here about having fun. I think it's so important to not take yourself too seriously. And I appreciate that everybody takes their job serious, and I take mine very serious as well. But, we're in hospitality. We're in the fun business. We're in the leisure business. And so because of that, we can't take everything so seriously that we can't enjoy ourselves or have a sense of humor, be a little bit playful at times. And I don't mean playful into the unprofessional way, but certainly your personality should come through and your employees' personality should come through. But you see up here a few things just to kind of help create that fun in the workplace. And part of the job as a manager sometimes is helping people see the lighter side of what's going on, especially if they feel like they've made a very bad mistake or, they're beating themselves up for something. You have to help them put it into perspective and, just see a different way. Okay, so we've covered seven different items today on motivation, but I'll just leave you with a few final thoughts, some things I've talked about through the course of this, but I think it's really important when you're trying to create a motivating work environment that you're constantly looking for ways to build your team's self-esteem together and individually. compliment their work and recognize when they do a good job. And if you're managing a multi-generational workforce, you certainly probably know that there are some generations that ask for a lot more feedback than others, and it's something to just embrace and not go against. Just embrace it. These other areas, I mean, I would just encourage you to look at your employees as individuals. Look at the way that where they are in the motivational pyramid, what's going to motivate them, and help them when they do something right, even when they do something wrong. I celebrate mistakes because that gives me an opportunity to train, and hopefully that mistake will never happen again. And then as much as you can, help them to know where they add value and why they're important. And if you do this, you'll have a better chance of staying in that motivating work environment with them, because you'll be satisfying their primal needs of food, shelter, and clothing. You'll show them that their job is secure and safe. You'll show them that they belong. You will provide opportunities for them to have improved self-esteem. And then eventually they get to the self-actualization. And that's really the pyramid. That's what you're trying to foster within your team. One of the things that's very popular right now on social media is it's hashtag Monday Motivation. We put something out every Monday, but basically these are groups banding together to encourage and uplift each other. There's a Motivation Mafia hashtag out there, and you can create your own. So if you already have your employees maybe on a text, or if you have an internal email or something that goes out, you might be able to do something like this for yourself. But it's a weekly reminder about motivation. You see one of ours there. But we put them out every Monday, 10 a.m. You're welcome to use ours if you don't want to create your own. But I would just encourage you to look for ways to keep this motivation mantra going, and recognize that some days are going to be better than others. That you know, if you're constantly looking at the employees and where they are with the motivation, you'll be able to adapt and change and keep that energy and enthusiasm. Okay, I'm sorry, I think I'm just right at the time here, but let me see if there are any questions. There's one question here. Any tips for managers to quickly and accurately identify how best to motivate individual employees, realizing that everyone responds to different approaches? Yes, so I would go back to that pyramid and look at your employees, and I would even have a conversation with employees. I mean, one of the things that might give you an indication with your employees that you have today, and also when you're hiring people, I ask them questions about, tell me something that you're most proud of. What did you do that you're most proud of? And that will give you insight into their values and what really motivated them to have their own self-discipline. So if they say, why I saved to buy my first car, you know, they might be motivated by money to be able to get to the next step on something. So then you could segue that into, you know, so what are you working towards today? Because chances are that's a theme in their life that will continue. And once you discover what's motivating them, then you can find different ways to create that atmosphere for them. And people are never more motivated than just before they achieve whatever it is. So a real great example is someone who doesn't have a job and really needs a job. They are motivated to get a job. They are motivated to get out there and apply, and they're real eager to take anything they can get their hands on until they get the job. Then once they get the job, then they become a little bit more picky about the next job or what's being asked about or asked of them at work. So I hope that answers your question. Does anyone else have any questions? I send you into silence. Okay, Ronnie, I don't see any other questions on here, so I'll turn it back over to you, and I'll just thank everybody for their time, and I appreciate being with you today.
Well, thank you, Whitney. I certainly appreciate your time and the tips and insights you provided today. And as we wait to see if there are any final questions, I'd like to remind everyone that this webinar and the presentation materials will be made available on the members-only networking site, Accelerate. And while there, I encourage you to check out the archive of other NGCOA webinars and additional educational materials. Also, keep in mind that this is the next to last session of our four-part series of webinars focusing on hospitality and enhancing the overall guest experience. The final installment, 10 Best Practices for Training, is scheduled for 2 p.m. Eastern on August 8th. I encourage you all to go ahead and mark your calendars for that and make plans to participate. I don't see any more questions, so I'd like to once again thank Whitney for her time and each of you for taking time out of your schedules to join us. And until the next webinar, take care.
Thank you.